NC Port. Good for the plate, great for the state.
We begin with a fun fact, this time from an Atlantic Coast Conference member beyond the bold North State. Georgia Tech is off to its first 7-0 start since 1966, meaning almost 60 years ago. At the time, the Yellow Jackets were in their 22nd and final season under legendary head coach Bobby Dodd. That Tech team ended up playing in the Orange Bowl and finishing number 8 in the national polls. If you're a younger person and perhaps don't recognize the name Bobby Dodd, that is the same man who led Georgia Tech to a 12-0 season and the national championship way back in 1952 when the Yellow Jackets were still members of the Southeastern Conference. And he's the same man whose name is still on the field in Atlanta, where the Ramblin' Wreck plays to this day. At this point, it has been more than a decade since Georgia Tech even finished a season in the national top 25. And in the Yellow Jackets' first 3 seasons under head coach Brent Key, they never finished better than 7-6. Yet here they are, 7-0, ranked number 7 in both major polls, and heavily favored in Atlanta against Syracuse this week to get to 8-0. The Jackets are not a dominant group this season. In many advanced team metrics, they don't even rank among the top 25 nationally, but they have been elite on special teams, very productive and efficient on offense, and good enough on defense so far. They also have benefited from a relatively weak schedule. Their best victory so far was probably their 27-18 win last week against Duke in Durham. And they needed that egregious officiating error late in regulation just to survive a game at unranked Wake Forest with a 30-29 overtime victory. Nevertheless, 7-0 is 7-0, and making the right kinds of history is something to be celebrated. Remember, among our FBS programs here in North Carolina, NC State hasn't won an ACC championship since 1979. UNC hasn't captured one since 1980, and Duke hasn't claimed that crown since 1989. And here's one more example from beyond the ACC. East Carolina hasn't finished a season ranked in the national top 25 since 1995. No matter what happens with Georgia Tech the rest of the way, and the Yellow Jackets still have challenging games at NC State and against Pitt and Georgia in Atlanta, this year's Tech team already has made first time since 1966 history with that 7-0 start, and that definitely deserves a fun fact style tip of the cap. Now on to this week's shout-outs, which include coaches and players from Duke, East Carolina, NC State, and Western Carolina. First, though, shout out to Louisville, and especially third-year head coach Jeff Brom, who has the Cardinals back in the top 25 after their 24-21 victory at previously undefeated Miami, which had been 5-0 and ranked number 2 in the polls going into that game. In the history of Louisville football, the Cardinals had played 18 true road games against top 10 opponents, and they had lost all 18 by an average margin of 26 points. This time, though, they outcoached their opponent even more than they outplayed their opponent, and that is a huge tribute to Coach Brom and the rest of his staff. Here's what I mean about the extremely important coaching aspect of this story. Louisville scored touchdowns on its first 2 possessions at Miami, and after the game, some of UM's defensive players said the Cardinals did a handful of things offensively that were not on any video from any of the Cardinals' previous games. By the time the Hurricanes made the necessary defensive adjustments to those things they said they had never seen before, Louisville already had a 14-0 lead in a game they ended up winning by only 3 points. That is great coaching. Meanwhile, Louisville's defense going against, remember, Miami's 6th-year senior quarterback Carson Beck, the Georgia transfer that some had started to hype as a Heisman Trophy contender, not us, became the first unit ever to intercept the veteran quarterback 4 times in a single game while also stuffing the Hurricanes' high-powered rushing attack. That also requires great coaching and execution. Finally, after lining up for a chip shot field goal attempt, Louisville executed a fake that got the Cardinals a first down inside the Miami 1-yard line. that led to a touchdown, meaning the Cardinals got 7 points on that drive instead of 3 in a game, again, that they ended up winning by only 3 points. That is great coaching. I don't want to take anything away from the Louisville players here. We have talked all season about sophomore Isaac Brown, a guy Brom signed out of the Miami high school ranks. How's that for some tasty icing on top of the win over the Hurricanes? Brown, we've described as one of the best running backs in the entire ACC. We've talked all season, including during last week's preview of the Louisville-Miami game, about senior Chris Bell as one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. Both of those guys, by the way, were signed and developed by Louisville straight from the high school ranks. They're not transfers, and both had very good games at Miami. Brown ran 15 times for 113 yards against his hometown Hurricanes. Bell had 9 receptions for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. In the end, of course, coming up with a plan that enables your best players to show why they're your best players also is a tribute to great coaching. So again, kudos to Brom and his staff for their absolutely brilliant contributions to that program's history-making triumph at number 2 Miami last Saturday.
Sports are awesome. But is Sport Clips better than sports?
Because Sport Clips is sports. Plus,
A neck and shoulder treatment. Sport Clips. It's a game changer.
Closer to home. Shout outs to a handful of players at Duke, ECU, and NC State for putting up the kinds of numbers that here at midseason place them among the top 10 statistical leaders nationally in the entire FBS ranks, which is not easy to do at this level of college football now that it has 136 teams. At Duke, quarterback Darian Mensah is second nationally with 316 passing yards per game, and he's tied for 8th in the country with 17 touchdown passes. As we've said on previous shows, the Tulane transfer has more than lived up to the hype and his multi-million-dollar paycheck during his first season in Durham as just a redshirt sophomore who's already on the NFL's radar. Also at Duke, senior wide receiver Cooper Barkate, a Harvard transfer who developed into an FCS All-American during his time in the Ivy League, has continued his remarkable success during his time with the Blue Devils. He ranks 8th nationally with 92 receiving yards per game. On the defensive side at Duke, senior end Vincent Anthony Jr., a product of Jordan High School right there in Durham, who now has 35 career starts for hometown Duke, ranks 8th nationally with 10.5 tackles for loss and 10th nationally with 6.5 sacks through the Blue Devils' first 7 games. At East Carolina, quarterback Caton Hauser is 9th nationally with 284 passing yards per game. He's a redshirt junior who transferred to ECU from Michigan State prior to last season, a former 4-star high school prospect from California who was entirely a backup during his 2 years with the Spartans. A 6'3", 225-pounder, Hauser clearly has clicked with second-year ECU offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach John David Baker. That pairing played a central role in rescuing the Pirates' topsy-turvy 2024 season from near disaster, and now that same duo is one of the main reasons, along with a solid and well-coached defense, why the team still has high hopes for a strong finish here in 2025. At NC State, sophomore quarterback C.J. Bailey ranks 9th nationally in throwing accuracy with a 72% completion percentage. Redshirt sophomore running back Hollywood Smothers, a Charlotte product who transferred to the Wolfpack from Oklahoma prior to last season, he ranks nationally with 105 rushing yards per game. And fifth-year senior linebacker Caden Forum, a guest not long ago on the David Glenn Show, ranks 9th nationally with about 10 tackles per game. If the Pack can somehow lick its wounds and recover emotionally from its ugly loss last week at Notre Dame and play well at Pitt this week, I definitely believe it's a team that's good enough personnel-wise to beat Georgia Tech in front of the home fans at Carter Finley Stadium on November 1st, and I am dead serious about that. Finally, shout out in the FCS ranks to Western Carolina, which has become one of our state's most fun teams to watch under fifth-year head coach Kerwin Bell, a former Florida Gators quarterback way back in the day, and a longtime offensive guru who, remember, led Valdosta State to the Division II National Championship back in 2018. This year's Catamounts rank 7th nationally in total offense at almost 500 yards per game, and they have one of the most exciting players in the FCS ranks in redshirt sophomore quarterback Teron Dickens, someone at this point we've shouted out multiple times on this show, including when he set that all-time, all divisions NCAA record with 46 consecutive completions in a single game, a comeback victory over Wofford earlier this year. Dickens is only 5'11" at most and 180 pounds, but he's now completing almost 80% of his passes and averaging almost 400 passing yards per game, two insanely impressive numbers that would lead the entire nation if Dickens had played enough games to qualify. When Dickens missed the Catamounts' first 3 games this season while dealing with eligibility issues, they went 0-3. Since his return to the lineup, they have gone 5-0 while averaging more than 42 points per game. Among the 32 NCAA football programs here in North Carolina, the teams with the best chance to win their conference this season may be NC Central and Western Carolina, both FCS programs, although it will not be easy for either team. The Catamounts are a perfect 4-0 in Southern Conference play, and now they have an open week, but they then have to tackle maybe the toughest 2-game stretch of their league schedule at Chattanooga on November 1st, then home against nationally ranked Mercer on November 8th. Western is seeking its first ever football championship in the SoCon, a league they joined way back in 1976. And the Catamounts definitely will be worth watching no matter what happens in Cullowhee or otherwise, as they continue to chase both that elusive SoCon crown and a rare invitation to the FCS playoffs. I'm David Glenn, and those are my fun facts and shout-outs as we head into college football's Week 9 right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
This has been Bold North State Football Daily, an exclusive presentation of the North Carolina Sports Network. Make sure you follow us on social media at the NC Sportsnet, and check out our website that is wall-to-wall coverage of North Carolina sports at ncsportsnetwork.com. Our foundational partner is the North Carolina Pork Council, raising the bacon, raising the bar. Telling the stories of the bold North State, this is the North Carolina Sports Network.